What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Anime Princess, and today we're going to evaluate the power level of the two recently unveiled Transfigured Spark Gems. I want to start off with the most interesting of the two, and also the one I think is the most powerful, which is Spark of Unpredictability. So right here we have the new skill gem, which we can compare to the basic Spark skill gem. And as we look at them, we can see there are a lot of similarities in the stats. However, the effectiveness of added damage is slightly worse on this Transfigured skill gem. And also, the base lightning damage is a little bit lower as well. We're also getting one less projectile. As you can see, this has 8 projectiles. And the default spark has 7, but you need to factor in 2 more because this is going to get 2 more with quality, and this is already at 20% quality. So we're losing those 3 things. However, we are gaining half a second of base duration, which is essentially 25% more duration. So I've done the math on this. Maybe we'll cover it in the next slide, but essentially the damage, when you factor in the increase into duration and the decrease to your base damage, you're probably going to gain a little bit of damage from Spark of Unpredictability, but it's not going to be too much. That's not the reason why this is so powerful. The part that makes the skill gem potentially very powerful is its unique property that reads launches unpredictable sparks with that move randomly with large differences in speed and distance until they hit an enemy or expire. And I think there's some typos in there that doesn't really make sense. What this is implying is there's going to be a large variance in the projectile speed. And we've seen this already on a Crucible mod, so I think we can expect it to be something like what we're seeing over here, where projectiles will travel, they'll have maybe 40% more to 40% less projectile speed at random. We don't know the values, it might not be 40. But it doesn't really matter what those values are. This is still going to be very powerful no matter what. And to put this into context, you have to understand how Spark works. So for every cast of Spark we make, when it hits an enemy, when one of those Spark bolts from the cast hit an enemy, all the rest turn off for 0.66 seconds and they can't do damage. So if all your Sparks are traveling towards the boss at the same speed, only one is going to hit the boss within the first 0.66 seconds, and then they're going to like scatter around and maybe some will come back. But if we can have a huge variance in speed, we can make it so that we're going to have a super fast projectile that's going to hit the boss right away, and then we're going to have a very slow one that's going to take 0.66 seconds to hit the boss. And as you stagger the projectile speed within the same cast, you are going to be able to have a much higher maximum theoretical damage. And that is really good. Also, simply for mapping, it's going to be nice to have some projectiles going really fast, and doesn't really matter if some others are slow, because the ones that are getting that more multiplier are going to shoot out and they're going to blast off screen and they're going to kill everything around you. And it's going to feel a lot better. You don't need every projectile to be doing this. There's going to be a mess of sparks everywhere anyways. But just getting that supercharged spark while you're clearing, even if it's just a few per cast, it will feel pretty good. So I would say this is a strict upgrade under any circumstance, most likely. I can't really see a scenario, even without fully understanding what this means. I think it could work in a variety of different ways, and you would almost always prefer this to the base Spark. So I'm really excited for this. I think this is going to make Spark really fun. It just makes sense with the skill, and this is quite an interesting alt quality. Props on the devs for coming up with something like this, where my Discord server full of Spark players, they thought this was bad because they're like, oh, some Sparks are going to be slow, this looks really bad. But if you think about it, it really makes sense for the skill with the internal timer to have your Sparks going at different speeds. So I'm very happy with this. Props on GGG. Looking forward to using this in the next league. Now to take a quick look at the math behind comparing Spark of Unpredictability with base Spark. Right here, we're looking at a 6th link using both of these qualities of Spark. And we're having Awakened Added Lightning in the 6th link because that is going to make use of this effectiveness of added damage multiplier, which is what's being nerfed. So this is sort of like a worst case scenario. So for Spark of Unpredictability, we only have a 160% multiplier. So we take the 449 flat damage from Awakened Added Lightning and multiply it by 0.6 for 718. Then we add this with the base damage on the gem, which is 1,705 to get 2,423. When we do the same thing with the stats on the base spark, we're going to get 2,836. So if we compare these, it's a 17% damage loss, which sounds bad, but keep in mind, we are gaining 0.5 seconds, which is 25% more duration, and you can compare those 1 to 1. So we're losing 17%, we're gaining 25% more damage, so it is a net positive. And this is actually the worst case scenario, which is probably not going to happen because a lot of people are going to want to use spark gloves, even if they didn't in the past, because now with the further nerfs to proj speed, you're going to want to get proj speed in other ways. And the easiest way, you know, it only costs 15 to 20 divs to craft spark gloves that have all the mods you want. And one of those mods is faster projectiles. So that's how you're going to overcompensate for all this projectile speed we might potentially be losing with the nerf to the spark gem. And if you're using spark gloves, you are definitely not going to be using Awakened Added Lightning. You're probably going to have spark, inspiration support, spell echo, and either increased critical damage, maybe pinpoint. I don't know. There's a few options for the 4th one that are all better than Awakened Added Lightning. With the glove setup, you're probably losing less than 17% damage, and you are still gaining the 25% more damage from the increase to the duration. And keep in mind, none of this even factors in how, on average, we are going to be hitting higher damage multipliers simply from this unpredictability effect, where the projectiles are being staggered within the cast so that each cast ends up hitting the boss more times. The second Transfigured gem we got today is Spark of the Nova. Now, this is potentially still powerful, although it's a lot less interesting to me, so we're not going to spend as much time talking about it. We've seen this before. This has existed as a threshold jewel before, to shoot sparks in a nova around us. This has existed back when Nemes worked with Spark, and it has also existed as the helmet enchant. And I guess we can talk about the current iteration of Spark of the Nova, which is the gem Spark of the Nova. Comparing Spark of the Nova to base Spark, we can see there are some differences. The mana cost is 25 versus 21 for regular Spark. And the biggest downside is going to be the nerf to the cast rate. Spark of the Nova casts every 0.75 seconds versus 0.65 on base Spark. So this is a strict 13% less damage, which means you are not going to want to use Spark of the Nova on a Leaguestart on a budget character because you don't want to lose that cast rate. Now, you are gaining a slight effectiveness of added damage. It's only 10%. It's negligible. And you're also gaining a negligible amount of base lightning damage. The most important things you're gaining are, well, you're getting 14 projectiles compared to 9 on base Spark. And obviously, you're going to be using Spark of the Nova to get the Nova effect where it fires in a circle. I think it's safe to assume you're going to be on a high budget aura stacker when you're putting this on. So losing the 13% damage from the reduction in cast rate is not really going to hurt you because each spark is going to hit for probably like, 20 to 100 million damage depending on how much you've invested. So you're not going to care too much cutting a little bit of damage for the quality of life of shooting in a Nova. Now, shooting in a Nova is going to help out in certain situations. For example, if you wanted to farm Legion, now suddenly you click the pillar and you just hold down Spark and you shoot everywhere, and it's going to much more easily blow open the whole pillar. Also, if you're doing something like Simulacrum, where everything is very contained, you might benefit from all those extra projectiles being shot out in every direction. You're going to fill up the screen much more easily. It's just going to feel nice shooting in a Nova. But again, there is a trade-off to that in terms of your cast speed. So keep that in mind. This is not something you are going to use on a cheap character where you're trying to squeeze out the damage. This is really just going to be, you know, the icing on the cake to a very strong build, just making it feel really good. So those are my thoughts for this. Really, this is not new, so there's not as much that we need to talk about compared to the very exciting Spark of Unpredictability, which has never existed before. All right, so yeah, both these gems look like they have a place, and I'm quite happy with them. Hopefully, we will see even more Spark gems coming in the future, because as we've seen, there is no Poison Spark gem. And I feel like they could come up with some other interesting ideas as well, because these aren't too off the wall. I feel like these make sense. There's nothing like a falling zombie or whatever. I hope we get some really wacky thing in the future. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about these two skill gems. Are these enough to excite you into playing Spark again? Maybe as a second build, if not for your League starter? As for my Spark guide, if you did want a League start, I would go with the 3.22 Spark Inquisitor League starter. It's still accurate. However, I am going to have to put out an update video, which I'll have to record after this goes up. It should come out tomorrow, and it's going to give some tips and advice on how to do things differently for 3.23, because we do have the entire Spark playlist that's going to hold your hand on how to go through Spark League start all the way up till the end of your league. However, I do have a few ideas of things you might want to do differently, so we're going to cover that in a short update video. It's also going to go over some changes to the POB, and there's going to be a slightly different POB in the description. All right, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you tomorrow, and you guys can catch me live on Friday for a league start. I am going to be league starting in a duo setup with a friend, so there's no Spark League start for me this league, although I definitely do intend on testing out these gems and making a Spark character after I'm done playing a week or two with my buddy. All right, peace out.